Yes. No, I want Thomas and a car that can speed. Yes. The rear door. Rear, and at once. What? What's that? But I must. It's official business. Well, I thought so. Hurry them up. Good bye. He turned and saw her troubled gaze following him with growing fear in her eyes. "What is the matter?" she asked anxiously. "Has something happened?" Just one moment he paused, and coming toward her laid his hands on hers tenderly. "Nothing the matter at all," he said soothingly. "At least nothing that need worry you. It is just a matter of pressing business. I'm sorry to have to go from you for a little while, but it is necessary. I cannot explain to you until I return. You will trust me? You will not worry?" "I will try." Her lips were quivering, and her eyes were filled with tears. Again he felt that intense longing to lay his lips upon hers and comfort her, but he put it from him. "There is nothing to feel sad about," he said, smiling gently. "It is nothing tragic, only there is need for haste, for if I wait I may fail yet. It is something that means a great deal to me. When I come back I will explain all." "Go," she said, putting out her hands in a gesture of resignation, as if she would hurry him from her. And though she was burning to know what it all meant, there was that about him that compelled her to trust him and to wait. Then his control almost went from him. He nearly took those hands in his and kissed them, but he did not. Instead, he went with swift steps to his bedroom door, threw open a chiffonier drawer, and took therefrom something small and sinister. She could see the gleam of its polished metal, and she sensed a strange little menace in the click as he did something to it. She could not see what, because his back was to her. He came out with his hand in his pocket, as if he had just hidden something there. She was not familiar with firearms. Her mother had been afraid of them, and her brother had never flourished any around the house. Yet she knew by instinct that some weapon of defense was in Gordon's possession, and a nameless horror rose in her heart and shone from her blue eyes, but she would not speak a word to let him know it. If he had not been in such haste he would have seen. Her horror would have been still greater if she had known that he already carried one loaded revolver and was taking a second in case of an emergency. "Don't worry," he called as he hurried out the door. "Henry will get anything you need, and I shall soon be back." The door closed and he was gone. She heard his quick step down the hall, heard the elevator door slide and slam again, and then she knew he was gone down. Outside an automobile sounded, and she seemed to hear again his words at the phone. The rear door. Why had he gone to the rear door? Was he in hiding? Was he flying from someone? What, oh, what did it mean? Without stopping to reason it out, she flew across the room and opened the door of the bedroom he had just left. Then through it passed swiftly to a bathroom beyond. Yes, there was a window. Would it be the one? Could she see him? And what good would it do her if she could? She crowded close to the window. There was a heavy sash with stained glass, but she selected a clear bit of yellow and put her eye close. Yes, there was a closed automobile just below her, and it had started away from the building. He had gone then. Where? Her mind was a blank for a few minutes. She went slowly, mechanically back to the other room, without noticing anything about her, sat down in the chair, putting her hands to her temples, and tried to think. Back to the moment in the church where he had appeared at her side and the service had begun. Something had told her then that he was different. And yet there had been those letters, and how could it possibly be that he had not written them? He was gone on some dangerous business, of that she felt sure. There had been some caution given him by the man to whom he first phoned. He had promised to take precaution. That meant the little wicked gleaming thing in his pocket. Perhaps some harm would come to him, and she would never know. And then she stared at the opposite wall with wonder-filled eyes. Well, and suppose it did? Why did she care? Was he not the man whose power over her but 2 short days ago would have made her welcome death as her deliverer? Why was all changed now? just because he had smiled upon her and been kind, had given her a few wild flowers and said her eyes were like them, had hair that waved instead of being straight and thin, and where was all her loyalty to her dear dead father's memory? How could she mind that danger should come to one who had threatened to tell terrible lies that should blacken him in the thoughts of people who had loved him? Had she forgotten the letters? Was she willing to forgive all just because he had declared that he did not write them? How foolish! He said he could prove that he did not, but of course that was all nonsense. He must have written them, and yet there was the wave in his hair and the kindness in his eyes, and he had looked, oh, he had looked terrible things when he had read that letter, as if he would like to wreak vengeance on the man who had written it. Could a man masquerade that way? And then a new solution to the problem came to her. Suppose this, whoever he was, this man who had married her, had gone out to find and punish George Hayne. Suppose... But then she covered her eyes with her hands and shuddered. Yet, why should she care? But she did. Suppose he should be killed himself? Who was he if not George Hayne, and how did he come to take his place? Was it just another of George's terrible tricks upon her? A quick vision came of their bringing him back to her. He would lie, perhaps, on that great crimson leather couch over there, just as he had lain in the dawning of the morning in the stateroom of the train, with his hands hanging limp, and one, perhaps, across his breast, as if he were guarding something, and his bright waves of brown hair lying heavy about his forehead. Only his forehead would be white, so white and cold, with a little blue mark in his temple, perhaps. The footsteps of the man Henry brought her back to the present again. She smiled at him pleasantly as he entered, and answered his questions about what she would have for breakfast; but it was he who selected the menu, not she, and after he had gone she could not have told what she had ordered. She could not get away from the vision on the couch. She closed her eyes and pressed her cold fingers against her eyeballs to drive it away, but still her bridegroom seemed to lie there before her. The colored man came back presently with a loaded tray, and set it down on a little table, which he wheeled before her, as though he had done it many times before. She thanked him, and said there was nothing else she needed, so he went away. She toyed with the cup of delicious coffee which he had poured for her, and the few swallows she took gave her new heart. She broke a bit from a hot roll, and ate a little of the delicious steak, but still her mind was at work at the problem, and her heart was full of nameless anxiety. He had gone away without any breakfast himself, and he had had no supper the night before, she was sure. He probably had given to her everything he could get on the train. She was haunted with regret because she had not shared with him. She got up and walked about the room, trying to shake off the horror that was upon her, and the dread of what the morning might bring forth. Ordinarily she would have thought of sending a message to her mother and brother, but her mind was so troubled now that it never occurred to her. The walls of the room were tinted a soft greenish gray, and above the picture moulding they blended into a woodsy landscape with a hint of water, greensward, and blue sky through interlacing branches. It reminded her of the little village they had seen as they started from the train in the early morning light. What a beautiful day they had spent together, and how it had changed her whole attitude of heart toward the man she had married. 2 or 3 fine pictures were hung in good lights. She studied them, and knew that the one who had selected and hung them was a judge of true art. But they did not hold her attention long, for as yet she had not connected the room with the man for whom she waited. A handsome mahogany desk stood open in a broad space by the window. She was attracted by a little painted miniature of a woman. She took it up and studied the face. It was fine and sweet, with brown hair dressed low, and eyes that reminded her of the man who had just gone from her. Was this then the home of some relative with whom he had come to stop for a day or two? And if so, where was the relative? The dress in the miniature was of a quarter of a century past, yet the face